takes my excavation into days come on.
Hi, I'm Marcus with the IndieMusicLab.com. So one of the most underrated types of songs anyone can record is a simple guitar vocal. Now the reason this type of song is underrated is pretty obvious, right? Because the more you get into production and the more you move past the beginner phase of production and recording, the more you want to add layers upon layers of stuff and fluff onto your tracks, right? And as someone who loves that game, I love the game of making really detailed and sophisticated tracks. Even with that being the case, the fact remains that some of my favorite songs are songs like Skinny Love and Stacks by Bon Iver. Super minimal, very basic guitar vocal songs. And so today, in part one of a three-part series here on YouTube, we are going to glean some inspiration from those early Bon Iver records, and I'm going to walk you through how to record, produce, and mix a really good sounding guitar vocal song. So to kick this series off, we are going to talk about recording, and I'm going to show you a few key things you need to know when it comes to recording the guitars and the vocals for this type of song. So let's jump right in. Alright, now I want to say a few words about the acoustic guitar performance itself, and I'm going to assume you're using acoustic guitar, but you don't have to be. This can apply to an electric vocal performance as well, or recording. But when you're talking about getting these songs, these very minimal productions to sound good, one of the key things to experiment with are things like alternate tunings. And the classic example of this is the song that I'm going to be walking you through in this series, which is a remake of Bon Iver's song Stacks. And I'm not going to get into the tuning on it because you can look that up. There's a bunch of videos and information on the different tunings of Bon Iver songs. But in this case, see, when you strum it with nothing, that's the one chord of this song. And so playing around with different tunings can really help you to create an interesting sound instead of the normal just G, D, C, because those just get so old and our ears have heard them so many times. So switch it up. Get accustomed to some alternate tunings and really learn the alternate tunings of artists that you respect and that you admire. And then after that, you want to get your DAW setup. So this might include a click track, which I do recommend, especially if you're starting out. You can get away with not using a click track for this type of minimal song since we're not even using drums in this case. But I still think it is a good skill to learn to really get good at playing along with the click track. But in any case, click track, open up your DAW, and use any DAW, by the way. I know I keep forgetting to mention this in some of my videos, but it does not matter. I'm using Studio One, you can use Logic, it's all the same concepts. You can apply everything I'm talking about here. And then this is the part where you also, if you are using a click track, you want to dial in the tempo and make sure that it is in a good place. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is very important, and that is microphone and mic placement. Now, first off, let's talk about microphone. I have one core all-purpose microphone, and that is literally the mic I'm using to speak into right now, and this is the Aston Origin. It's just over $200. It is by no means an expensive mic. And so use whatever you have. If you have an SM58, if you have an AT2020, the cheap condenser mic by Audio-Technica, you can use so many different mics. Don't get hung up on, I don't have a really good mic. Use what you have, assuming you have something as basic as, say, an SM58. Use that and you'll be good to go. Now, when it comes to mic placement, this is not an exact science, but I'm going to give you a rule of thumb, or at least a basis from which you can start from, and then feel free to experiment with it from there. So one of the things I learned about a decade ago from Graham Cochran over at the Recording Revolution was this very simple technique of you place the microphone essentially 12 inches away from the guitar, you have it directly in front of the sound hole, but then you angle the microphone towards the 12th fret, which is here. So I'm just gonna hold this up so you can see about what that would look like. So we have the microphone angled right here right now, so that would be about something like this. It's 12 inches away, it's in front of the sound hole, but angled towards the 12th fret. So that is just a great place to start from. Don't get hung up on it. Don't try to make it an exact thing. Start there, get your first couple songs recorded in using that exact technique, and then feel free to experiment with it from there. But that is just a tried and true, proven way to get a solid and balanced acoustic guitar recording. And then finally, one more thing I'll mention about the acoustic guitar recording is try to set up the microphone as close as you can to the center of your room. This is important because you want to minimize the amount of ambience and room noise that bleeds in and gets into your microphone, and that can negatively impact the track. Because if I were to record this right up against the wall, right up against the corner or something like that, it's not going to sound as good as if I were to move the microphone directly in the center of the room. So that's just a rule of thumb, move the microphone right in the middle. Oh, and I said that was the last thing. There's one more quick thing that you need to know, and that is please, please, please do not clip. Turn down the input volume on your interface, or over here. Yeah, turn it down. Turn it down. Now I'm turning my voice down. You gotta turn it down. You can have it at super low volume. It's not gonna affect the sound quality. But what is gonna affect the sound quality is if you have the gain too loud and then you clip, and then you have that digital distortion, especially on those louder parts, or maybe even the entire performance if you really have it cranked. So play it safe, please. You don't need that excess volume. You can always turn it up later in your DAW when you're producing it, when you're mixing it. Just start at a super nice low volume and don't clip whatever you do. Now, once you've got everything set up and ready to record your acoustic guitar, one of the mindsets that I like to adopt is try to get it in one take. What I mean by that is you want to approach it as if you are performing it live. This is really going to help you on a psychological level to not fall into this lazy approach of, well, I can record 20 takes and I'll find a good take in there somewhere if I just comp and split it up. Like, don't approach it from that mindset. Even if that ends up happening, if it sound, that's fine. If it sounds good, it sounds good. But I want you to approach it from this perspective of, I'm going to record this as if I were performing live, and I'm going to try to get it in one take. Now, that being said, what I also like to do is, instead of going at it in this recording from start to finish, like some people might advise you, I like to record, try to get it as good as I can in one take. And then when I mess it up to where I know I obviously messed it up, I just stop the recording and I start again. Or I'll create a new track and I'll start it right before where I messed up, and then I'll keep it going. I just like that approach. I think it gets so cluttered if you've got 10, 15 tracks with only 70% of the guitar tracks from start to finish actually sounding good, and then you have to figure out which ones you want to use. I like the simple approach, and that is what I'm going to recommend to you as well. So try to get it in one take, and then also, as soon as you mess up, don't feel like you have to keep going all the way to the end. Just stop and then come back and really start there and then go to the rest of the song as best you can. Now, a really cool technique that has been used a gazillion times in music production is recording double-tracked guitars. And 100%, if you haven't done this before, please try this. This is going to help really add some fullness to your tracks, especially for a guitar vocal style song where there isn't really much else going on. So we want to create more fullness often by doubling down on the very small number of tracks that we have, which is usually just a guitar and a vocal. So what you want to do is just get your first take recorded. Just focus on that first, So once you have that done from start to finish and you feel good about it, then play that in your headphones as you're recording, create a new track. You're not duplicating the original audio, you're creating a completely new track, and then you're going to record either the same part or you can switch it up. One of the best ways to switch it up is by using a different acoustic guitar if you have access to one. That is one of the tried and true best ways to create some variation and some color, is if when you do these double-tracked acoustic guitar style songs, it really creates differentiation when you use a different guitar. Another thing you can do is change the tuning. You can change the voicing, change the position of the capo, maybe have one where it's like this up high with the capo, and then another one where you're doing bar chords or whatnot. Just to create some variation and some differentiation between the two guitar tracks or three guitar tracks. You can layer in as many as you want. But I do recommend, if you're doing double track guitars, start with either 2 or 3. So now I'm going to show you what my acoustic guitar recording sounds like without any plugins on it yet. We're just talking about recording up to this point, and these are 2 takes. And I'm going to show you what these sound like dry as they were recorded into my DAW. Okay, now let's segue into recording the vocal for a guitar vocal song. The first thing I'm going to talk about is mic placement. So this is very similar to what we did with the guitar. Center of the room is the best, so as far away from any corners and as far away from just any walls as possible is the ideal place for your microphone. And then when it comes to distance and like where you want to be up and down is very simple. Just shoot straight into the center of the microphone. Don't overcomplicate it, don't overthink it, just try to angle it directly into the center of the microphone. Now, distance is where this is where beginners really often get it wrong, and that is they eat the mic too much. They're right up on it. You don't need to be right up on the microphone. That said, though, this particular song, because I'm basically in my head voice the whole time, it is advantageous in this case to be super close on the mic, and I was pretty close, closer than I usually am. So there are exceptions, but if you're doing a standard type of song where you're doing any louder notes, you don't want to be super close on the microphone because of what's called the proximity effect. And that means if you're super close, and especially if you're singing loudly, you get a lot of low frequency buildup, a lot of boominess, like wah wah, a lot of those types of frequencies that come through. And the problem with that is it's just harder to mix. It's harder to EQ and to make it sit well in the mix if that is your approach. So take a step back from the microphone. The general rule of thumb is 6 to 12 inches away from the microphone. And if you actually get a tape measure out and you actually look how far up to 8, 10, 12 inches is, it's going to seem really far away for most of you. So I would say for the majority of you guys watching this, take a step back from the microphone when you're recording your vocals, and it is going to help your vocals sound better. The only exception I would say is if the entire song that you're singing is very falsetto-y and super light. For everything else, take a step back. And then also let me reiterate, just like I talked about with the acoustic guitar, when you're recording it, do not clip. Turn down that input gain. You don't need much at all. Turn it way down if you need to. This is not affecting the sound. We are in the digital world. We are no longer in the analog domain where you're trying to crank it through a console and get some nice distortion, but it's very warm and harmonic. It's not the same. Digital clipping, digital distortion is a completely different animal, and it is an animal that will eat and kill your vocal. So do not allow your vocal level to clip as you're recording in. Turn down that input gain, please. Now, this video isn't really about vocal technique or vocal tone, but I will mention one quick thing here to help you out, and I think this is going to help a lot of you, is when you're warming up for this type of recording and you're ready to get your take in, one of the best things you can ever do is run through your song, run through the melody using an exercise. So my favorite exercise for this is an NG. So just run through the melody from start to finish, maybe play the song if you already have some instrumentation to play along with, and just sing the melody, but only using the exercise. So NG is great. The classic lip roll, that's a fantastic exercise as well. A couple others are, and these are especially great for if you want this type of falsetto sound, is something like B, V, or we. So beep, 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 or V, 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 V. The V there adds some extra air and texture to it, right? So that can help you kind of lock into that place. And then we, that one as well. The key is when you're doing this exercise, you want to focus on the placement. Like, what are you feeling resonance-wise in your head? And then once you really feel that and get into that space, what you want to do then is take that feeling and apply the actual lyrics of the song to that pocket. that you found with the exercise. Does that make sense? So you find the pocket, you find that placement using an exercise, and then you sing the actual lyrics over it while trying to maintain that same positioning and resonance here in your head. And then finally, 2 more things I'll quickly mention about recording the vocal. One is, just like with the guitar, try to get it in one take. Take the mental approach of, I'm going to perform this, I'm going to record this as if it is live. And the other thing is, you want to ask yourself, do I want vocal doubles? And then right after that is, what kind of vocal double do I want? Now for this remake in particular, and this Bon Iver song Stacks, it is what I call the share the spotlight technique. And what I mean by that is there is not one lead vocal, because often that's what'll happen, right? You have one lead vocal, and then you'll have the backgrounds and the doubles perhaps maybe panned left and right. That is not the case in this song. In this case, it is a share the spotlight technique, which means you have 2 lead vocals that have equal dominance, that share equal weight. And so what that means is you just need to record 2 different takes, and then once we get into the vocal production and mixing, we'll talk about how to process them, how to pan them, and space them so that they really sit well in the mix together. But that's important to know what you want to do, because if you only record one vocal take in this phase, then you can't achieve the sound that we're going for once we get to the vocal mixing. So keep in mind, what do you want your vocal to sound like? And then go and record whatever style of vocal you need, whether that is just one lead vocal, whether that is, like I did here, the share the spotlight technique, or some variation of that. So now I'm going to show you what my vocals sounded like on this remake with no plugins, no processing. This is what they sounded like, completely dry, recorded in.
This my excavation and two.
Alright my friend, now if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my free guide, The 7 Steps to a Killer Indie Song. I'll leave a link to that in the description. And then also, be on the lookout because over the next 2 weeks, we are going to finish up this 3-part series. Next week, we are going to talk about guitar production and mixing. And then in the 3rd video, we are going to talk about vocal production and mixing. And you're going to be able to watch this song grow and evolve into a really nice, polished guitar vocal song that has hardly any tracks, but it still sounds really full and sounds really good. So I hope you're excited. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.